Hi friends, as always I'm very excited to see you here. If you're meeting for the first time, I'm Uma Shankar Pandey and this is the Dr. USP channel. I host videos on media, communication and research on this channel. Russian-American linguist Roman Jakobson proposed the Jakobson's model of communication in the 1960s. This is a complete model of communication which moves away from the standard transmission models and speaks of 6 different functions of language in the communication process. Let's see Jakobson's model of communication explained in this video. There are 6 important elements required for any communication process: the context, the addresser, the addressee, a common code, contact, and the message itself. According to Roman Jakobson, all these 6 elements are the focal point of 6 different communication functions. In 1960, Russian-American linguist Roman Jakobson proposed a model of interpersonal communication which moved beyond basic transmission models, highlighting the importance of the codes and social contexts involved. According to the model, language must be investigated in all the variety of its functions. A message is sent by the addresser, a sender, to the addressee, who is a receiver. The message cannot be understood outside of a context. The addresser establishes the context of the message. A code should be common fully or at least partially to the addresser and the addressee. An important condition for communication according to this model is contact. It could be a physical channel or a psychological connection between the addresser and the addressee. It enables both of them to stay in communication. Jakobson proposes that each of these 6 factors, addresser, message, context, contact, code and addressee, determines a different linguistic function. So here is a visual representation of the model. There is the addresser who sends a message, and there's a context to the message, and a contact, as we said, is necessary for this communication process to continue. There must be a code which is understood to both the addresser and the addressee, and the addressee himself or herself is a very important part of the communication process. Jakobson was among the first to suggest that ordinary discourse goes well beyond a situation of simple information transfer. He pointed out that human discourse is shaped by the setting, the message, the expressive resources used, it could be verbal and non-verbal, and the participants, making an emotional claim on everyone involved. Roman Jakobson's model outlines 6 major functions of language, which are the referential function, which is the context, the conative function, which corresponds to the addressee, the emotive function, which corresponds to the addresser, the poetic function, which is the message, the metalingual function, which is the code, and the phatic function, which is the contact. The emotive function comprises the addresser's emotions, attitudes, social status, etc. Emotivity here refers to the addresser's intent, which no matter how literal his or her message might be, invariably involves the latent presence of emotions. For example, when we say, "Wow, what a goal." The emotive function refers to the attitude of the addresser through emphasis, intonation, loudness, pace, and other such things. The expressive function, focused on the addresser, aims at a direct expression of the speaker's attitude toward what he is speaking about. It tends to produce an impression of a certain emotion. The emotion could be true or feigned. The cognitive function's main aim is to influence the behavior and attitudes of other people. It also involves commands and requests for the receiver. It is more concerned with giving the conceptual meaning. The cognitive function is the effect, it could be physical, psychological or social, that the message has or is expected to have on the addressee. The language used with this function is meant to get the attention or a reaction from the addressee. For example, can you make a poster for me? The addressee is the human embodied origin of culture and not a mechanical receiver or signal destination. His interpretation is a vital element of connotation. It is not just passive reception. The context or referential function is what is being spoken of, what is being referred to. One of the main functions of language is sharing information with an audience. This is the language one uses to convey information in an objective way. For example, when we say Argentina are the FIFA World Champions. For the referential function, a message is constructed to carry information unambiguously and clearly. This function relates to what is being discussed. It is also the term that indicates that any message is perceived as referring to something other than itself. The poetic function, also known as the aesthetic function, involves the use of language as a linguistic artifact. The poetic or the aesthetic function is defined as the focus on the message itself, where the message stops being a means of communication and becomes its own goal. Any object that is valued for its beauty rather than its usefulness fits this poetic function. The poetic function is the focus on the message for its own sake. The associations, it could be equivalence, similarity and dissimilarity, synonymity or antonymity, the repetitions of sound values, stresses, accents, the word and phrase boundaries and the relationships, and how these are combined in sequence relate to the poetic function. For the phatic function, a message designed to establish or ensure continuous social contact. They are intended solely for making contact and keeping the social relation going. All kinds of rituals and social practices are based on phatic communication, which is not intended to create new meanings but to ensure social cohesion. This phatic function keeps open communication lines and helps maintain social relationships. For example, you meet a friend accidentally in a mall. You start talking about something that may not be very important, but you talk just to keep the communication going. A message is designed to establish or ensure continuous social contact. The meta-linguistic function is that use of language by which people check out with each other whether they are on the same page and whether they are using the same codes in the same contexts. Metalingual refers to talking about the language itself. It discusses the features and definitions and attempts to clarify ambiguity. In the metalingual function, we use the message to refer to the code being used. For example, I use this word as a noun. It includes checking whether the addresser and the addressee understand each other, whether they talk about or mean the same thing. Meta-language includes all other ways of setting the frame of reference. Now to summarize the model once again, so On the left side we have the addressor, and the addressor is the focal point of the emotive or the expressive function. Then we have the message, which performs the poetic function. There is a context in the message. This context performs the referential function, which often is also known as the cognitive function. It is addressed to an addressee, and we have seen the conative or the interpretive function, which is associated with the addressee. And then we have the contact, which performs the phatic function. And finally, there is the code, which performs the metalinguistic function. Thanks for staying along, friends. As always, it was a delight having you here. I'll be back with another video very soon. Till then, have a great time.